On every continent of the world, the United Kingdom walks taller today than it has done for many years.
Criminality, in particular drug supply and usage, is now connected to people who came here on small boats illegally.
The only act of a parliament that has some kind of moral integrity is to rip up her illegal and immoral bill, which has no place on our statute book.
We simply can't accept hundreds of millions of people who would no doubt look to come here for a better life. I am afraid this country is nearly full.
Proves, whether in Greece or in Australia, that the only two policies that work is either offshoring or pushback. Nothing else works. Unless we pass this bill, unless we have the courage to try and create an asylum system that gets into this country, the real asylum seekers, the Mara Shabazz, the people who have been raped, forced into marriages, we will have a never-ending stream of young men paying criminal gangs to get into our country.
The UK has always welcomed those who are fleeing persecution, regardless of whether they come through a safe and legal route. By definition, someone fleeing for their life will more often than not be unable to access a legal route. I don't think it's enough to say we will meet our requirements by sending people to claim asylum in Rwanda. And this matters because of the reputation of the UK on the world stage. And that matters because the UK's ability to play a role internationally is based on our reputation, not because we are British, but because of what we stand for and what we do. My second concern relates to the implications for modern slavery. I'm grateful to the fact that Number 10 has offered to discuss this with me, and I hope we can find some resolution. But as it currently stands, we are shutting the door on victims who are being trafficked into slavery here in the UK. If they come here illegally, they would not be supported to escape their slavery. And the Home Office itself recognises the damage this bill will do. In the explanatory notes, they make the point about the clauses 21 to 28 on public order disqualification. These provisions are subject to a sunsetting mechanism so that they can be suspended should the current exceptional illegal migration situation no longer apply. In other words, we know this isn't ideal, but we've got lots of people coming illegally, we've got to do something, so the victims of modern slavery, if you like, will be collateral damage. I welcome the acknowledgement that this part of the bill could be reversed, but it could also then be reinstated. The Home Office knows this bill means genuine victims of modern slavery will be denied support.
The British public know that border security is national security, that illegal migration makes us all less safe. They know that the financial and social costs of uncontrolled and illegal migration are unsustainable. They know that if our borders are to mean anything, we must control who comes into this country and the terms under which they remain here. That's why stopping the boats is my top priority.
They queued up one after another to dismiss the perfectly reasonable concerns of the British public as racist and fascist. And from the SNP, we heard what could only be described as performative compassion.
My focus goes back to what was already mentioned, which is Clause 49, which is looking specifically at interim measures from the Strasbourg Court, which we know have no actual effect in UK law, but UK courts may take them into effect when they're passing their own judgments. Would the Shadow Home Secretary and the Labour Party support me in wanting to see this particular clause beefed up and actually making sure that the Home Secretary is under a statutory duty to remove unlawful migrants?
Well, I think he perhaps should have put that question to the Home Secretary, because he appears to disagree with his own Conservative government policy and be off on another bit of freelancing for himself, further undermining, I would say, any possibility of getting international agreements, whether it's on returns or anything else. He is planning to make it even harder to get the kinds of returns agreements we need and to get the kind of international cooperation we need as well.
My constituency is the most deprived in England. Many residents can't access housing, struggle to obtain a GP appointment and have little chance of finding an NHS dentist. They have paid into the system all of their lives, And is it any wonder that when they see people illegally entering this country, receiving free accommodation, free food and access to local services, it leaves them incredibly frustrated and angry? Let's dispel some of the myths around this issue that we hear from the opposition, lefty lawyers and celebrity do-gooders. Many of the people entering this country in small boats are not genuine asylum seekers. If their lives were truly in danger, they would have claimed sanctuary in the first safe country they arrived in. Instead, these people have travelled through many safe European nations to try to come to the UK. They are invariably single young men and increasingly from nations such as Albania. They are not coming here for sanctuary, but as illegal economic migrants. Our public services are already creaking under enormous pressure, and we simply can't accept hundreds of millions of people who would no doubt look to come here for a better life. I am afraid this country is nearly full.
I hear from members opposite in the Labour Party who like to virtue signal and show that they are representing their own views rather than those of their own constituents when they talk about people who should be coming to this country because they are raped or because they are children or because... What is actually happening, if you look at the Albanians who've come over here, just to quote an example, section 14,000 of them have come from a safe country in Albania to another safe country in France and over here. Why aren't we hearing about them ever from members opposite? We only hear about these tiny numbers who they like to talk about.
I have a constituent whose wife and daughters are stranded in Turkey, having fled Afghanistan in August 2021. They don't have the documents to apply for a family visa. They aren't eligible for the ACRS. They've played by the rules for the past 18 months, and they are desperate enough to consider crossing the channel to be reunited. And yet government ministers have not lifted one single finger to help. And even those who are eligible for the ACRS can't make it work. Not one Afghan has come to the UK via Pathway 3 of the ACRS regime since it opened in June last year. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary on the face of this bill invites Parliament to rip up international law. The only act of a Parliament that has some kind of moral integrity is to rip up her illegal and immoral bill, which has no place on our statute book.
The system is broken. We have to do something about it. And international experience proves, whether in Greece or in Australia, that the only two policies that work is either offshoring or pushback. Nothing else works. Unless we pass this bill, unless we have the courage to try and create an asylum system that gets into this country the real asylum seekers, the Mara Shabazz, the people who have been raped, forced into marriages, we will have a never-ending stream of young men paying criminal gangs to get into our country.
On this side of the House, we believe that without border controls, national security ultimately is compromised, that the fabric of communities begin to fray, and public services come under intolerable pressure. We believe that whilst we should always be generous to those in need, there are limits on the support that we can provide. It is members on this side of the House who are on the right side of the moral debate.
We are a fair country, we are a welcoming country. We've shown this with Ukraine, with Syria, with Afghanistan, with Hong Kong. We had 89,000 people from Ukraine, 18,900 from Afghanistan. This is also a humane policy, and this is tackling the people smuggling gangs who are responsible for the deaths in the Channel, which cannot continue. And we also must make processing shorter, and we've got to clear that backlog for the genuine refugees.
The opposition say we should do more with partners around the world, never mind that this government has returns agreements with Albania, Georgia, Serbia, Nigeria, India, Pakistan and Serbia. And as for our world-leading agreement with Rwanda, well, we all know what the opposition would do about that. They would scrap it. The opposition say that this government can't be trusted with our borders, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But the fact is that the leader of the opposition and some 70-odd Labour MPs, a third of their parliamentary party, signed letters signed letters to stop the dangerous foreign criminals being kicked out of Britain, one of whom tragically went on to kill another person in the UK. A shameful day for the Labour Party. How easy, Mr Deputy Speaker, how easy it is for the opposition to say, never mind the British public, believing that they know better, arrogantly, dismissively. The truth is, Mr Deputy Speaker, they don't have a plan, but you know what's even worse? They don't actually care that they don't have a plan. If they listened, they would hear a clear, reasonable and resounding message from the British people.
In past eras, there has been consensus, for example, on support for Syrian refugees, go back generations on support for the kinder transport. There has been that support in place. We've also had past consensus about the kind of practical, sensible measures around border security as well. I believe it should be possible to build that consensus, and we would work with the government to do that. But that is not what we are getting from the Conservative Party, the Conservative government, the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. Instead, we have got a Home Secretary who's quite happy to ramp up the rhetoric rather than ever build a calm consensus around a practical plan that sorts things out. And how desperate does it become if what you're doing is ramping up hostility and hatred towards the victims of trafficking and slavery? That is not leadership. Britain is better than this. Mr Deputy Speaker, Labour will vote for action to stop the gangs and to prevent these dangerous boat crossings. We'll vote for a new cross-border police unit, for fast-track decisions and returns to clear the backlog and end hotel use, for new agreements with France and other countries on returns, on family reunion, on reforming resettlement. We will vote for action that rebuilds border security and restores a properly functioning, credible asylum and refugee system that is properly controlled. But we will not vote for more chaos. We will not vote for a traffickers' charter that lets criminal gangs off the hook, that fails to tackle dangerous boat crossings and that locks up children and leaves some of the most vulnerable people undermined. We won't vote for this bill tonight.